In a bustling city lived a 36-year-old man named Sergey. To the outside observer, his life was the very picture of modern success and stability. He had held a respectable position at a major corporation for 15 years, paid his mortgage on time, and followed a highly predictable, linear path: home to the office to home. His colleagues considered him lucky. His salary arrived without delay, his responsibilities were clearly defined, and his office was a familiar, unchallenged sanctuary. At home, Sergey was greeted by a partner with whom he had shared many years. He genuinely believed that this was exactly how life was supposed to unfold. It wasn't perfect, it certainly wasn't vibrant or passionate, but it was incredibly safe. Over the years, Sergey had stopped asking himself if he was actually happy. The days bled into one another in a monotonous loop: the jarring sound of the morning alarm, the suffocating crowds during the commute, the endless stream of monotonous reports, the bone-deep exhaustion, and the flickering glow of the television screen serving as his evening lullaby. Everything felt secure, yet there was a lingering, undeniable caveat. Deep in his soul, Sergey knew he was living entirely on autopilot. He woke up devoid of anticipation and returned to bed without any sense of accomplishment. Initially, it was just a faint, background whisper of dissatisfaction, a feeling he easily drowned out by rationalizing that everyone lives like this, and that life is a duty, not a perpetual celebration. Then came the day when his carefully constructed house of cards collapsed entirely. The morning began like any other: the same bitter coffee, the same congested route to work, the same desk. However, by midday, he was unexpectedly summoned to the executive office. What followed was a blur of sterile, corporate jargon, words like restructuring, optimization, and downsizing. They assured him it was nothing personal. In a matter of minutes, the team he had dedicated a decade and a half of his life to was no longer his. The electronic keycard he had swiped thousands of times was suddenly deactivated, stripped of its power. Everything he associated with his identity and stability was reduced to a single sheet of paper bearing a signature and a harsh corporate stamp. Sergey walked out of the glass building clutching a cardboard box of personal belongings, carrying an overwhelming, heavy emptiness in his chest. In one ruthless sweep, he lost the foundation he had leaned on for years: his status, his rhythm, his illusion of safety. Wondering who he was without his title and what his actual worth was, he returned to his apartment earlier than usual seeking solace, only to discover that the universe wasn't finished stripping away his old life. Standing in the hallway were packed suitcases. His long-term partner had finally reached a breaking point, exhausted from living next to a perpetually drained, irritable, and emotionally hollow man who had long ceased to notice the people closest to him. There was no dramatic argument, no yelling, just the quiet, devastating statement of a finalized decision. Their shared journey was over, and they were parting ways. By sunset on that singular, catastrophic day, Sergey was entirely untethered. He was without a job, without the partner who had anchored his personal life, without the career that had consumed his youth, and without the collective identity he had grown so accustomed to. That evening, he sat perfectly still in the deafening silence of an apartment that suddenly felt entirely alien. There was no background noise from the television, no clatter of keyboard keys, no chime of incoming messages. It was just Sergey and a terrifying realization he could no longer brush aside: all those years he had white-knuckled his grip on stability, he had been slowly marching toward total emptiness. This was the breaking point, the exact moment where a person can easily fracture, spiral into toxic self-pity, and get permanently stuck in an endless loop of asking why this is happening to them. For the first few days, Sergey did exactly that. He wandered through his apartment like a ghost haunting the museum of his own past, entirely displaced. He procrastinated on updating his resume, let his phone ring out, and ignored every message. His internal monologue was a constant, agonizing scream that he had lost absolutely everything. But one morning, the narrative shifted. Staring blankly at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, Sergey saw past the tragedy. He didn't just see a victim who had been unfairly terminated and abandoned. He saw a man who, for years, had willingly rented out his own dreams, his precious time, and his health in exchange for a manufactured sense of security. He realized with brutal clarity that he hadn't just lost everything, but had been stripped down to a foundation, a void where he could either crumble into dust or, for the very first time, ask himself what kind of life he actually wanted to live. The emptiness, which initially felt like a cruel punishment, miraculously morphed into a launch pad. Sergei dug out an old, dust-covered notebook filled with forgotten ideas, passions, and goals. Most of them had been indefinitely shelved under the label of having no time or saving them for later. Later was officially dead, there was only now. He had no titles, no relationship obligations, and no master plan, but he possessed the ultimate freedom, the ability to start completely from scratch without being chained to his former identity. He made a conscious choice to view his devastation not as a life sentence, but as a severe, agonizing, yet profoundly honest second chance. Sergei began with the most immediate, tangible realities. He meticulously reviewed his finances, drafting a strict budget and mercilessly cutting out every non-essential expense. He took on a temporary, unglamorous gig that was far below his former pay grade and prestige, but it provided a baseline survival income and the mental bandwidth to strategize. He also implemented a rigorous but simple daily routine, waking up early and forcing himself to move, integrating daily exercise to clear the mental fog. Furthermore, he ruthlessly curated his circle, distancing himself from former acquaintances whose conversations revolved solely around complaining and victimhood. He drastically cut his social media consumption, refusing to compare his chaotic reality to the curated highlight reels of others. Instead of frantically blasting his resume to land an identical corporate role, Sergei took inventory of his actual, hard skills. He began studying, not to acquire another meaningless credential to frame on a wall, but to master practical abilities that the modern world truly valued. He stopped mourning the respectable corporate manager he used to be and started engineering a new man. Accepting that the past was dead was agonizing, but the thought of willingly returning to his old, zombified existence just to feel safe again was even more terrifying. Step by tiny step, Sergei carved out a new trajectory. He experimented with freelance projects, faced brutal rejections, and made mistakes. But the fundamental difference was the driving force behind his actions. He was no longer motivated by a desperate urge to maintain an illusion, he was fueled by a conscious desire to author his own existence. Eventually, he discovered a niche where he could perfectly blend the administrative discipline of his past with the dynamic new skills he had acquired. His work transformed from a mere paycheck into a genuine avenue for personal growth. He stopped burning the midnight oil for the sake of a manager's fleeting approval and established ironclad boundaries, learning to fiercely respect his own time and energy. His life didn't become a flawless fairy tale, as he still faced stress, setbacks, and bad days. But the core paradigm had shifted. He no longer lived in the perpetual fear of losing things. Having already lost everything, he was entirely liberated from the suffocating anxiety of holding on to things that had long since stopped serving him. Sergei's journey highlights a profound, universal truth: sometimes, losing everything is not a cosmic punishment, but a brutally honest starting line. It is the exact coordinate in space and time where you are forced to drop the theatrical masks, abandon your comfortable roles, and look at your authentic self. Imagine how drastically your own trajectory could shift if you stopped measuring your inherent worth by what you have lost. What if, instead of endlessly crying out about why this is happening, you paused and asked what this situation is demanding you change, and what it has cleared the space for? Losing a career, a long-term relationship, or your social standing is undeniably agonizing, but it is also a rare, unfiltered audit of your life's foundation. It forces you to see whether you were building your existence on genuine values, or merely on a foundation of fear and habit. When you finally release your death grip on the things that no longer serve you, your hands are finally free to grasp something completely new. If Sergei's story resonates with you, and if you see echoes of your own struggles in his journey, please support this content by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. It takes only a second of your time, but it serves as a vital signal that these stories of resilience matter and need to be told. Share your voice in the comments below about a significant loss you have navigated and the vital truth it taught you about yourself. I wish you unwavering health, unshakable inner peace, and the profound strength required to stand back up, even when the entire world seems to have crumbled beneath your feet. Remember, the exact moment you feel you have lost everything is often the very moment you finally begin to live your true, authentic life.